everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Minecraft the Voyage. We are on some of my favorite chapters and favorite part of the book. Today we are reading page 136 to 157, 21 pages entirely, which is a little bit off of the beaten path. Today we are reading chapter 17, Down the Hole, chapter 18, Strange Characters, and chapter 17 and 18. If I remember these chapters, it's nothing much happens, but, you know, the chapter after 18 is pretty good. So let's start it with chapter 17, Down in the Hole. The Troublestone Mr. Barnacle, extraction methods explained and complained about, the tale of the Brainwine Hill Mine. And so, Stacks became a miner in the Stumbles Extraction Company. The other miners on Mr. Barnacle's crew were familiar to him from his long-ago memories of being an apprentice down at the Stonecutter Mine. They weren't the same people, of course, but they reminded Stacks of the miners who had been employed by his family back then. Kristoff liked to work in silence, disliking any sound other than his powerfully muscled arms reducing block after block of rock into loose debris. Hody was little more than a kid, and loved to talk, telling everyone about the great things he's going to do after he struck it rich as a miner. Phillips was that miner Stacks' father had called a mineshift lawyer, full of complaints about how things were run and opinions that should be different. Tanner had been eyed for changes in composition of rock, but careless about safety measures and kept forgetting equipment. Jerwell, on the other hand, would refuse to dig if he suspected anything wasn't exactly as it should be. Then there were the miners who left no particular impression beyond wanting to do the jobs at home. Syke, Gibbons, Julius, and others whose names he hadn't got straight yet. The only miner Stacks couldn't figure out was a young woman named Osk Fikar. Osk was pale skin and wild squiggles of red hair. She wasn't a particularly good miner, for one thing. She wasn't very strong, often stopping or slump over her pickaxe while in the hardier mines were carrying away the rock. But she was also frequently distracted, telling anyone who'd listened about the fantastic invention she dreamed up and insisted would change the world. The key to those wonderful machines, Osk explained, was redstone. Stacks was familiar with redstone from the Stonecutter Mine. It was gleaming red material found in the deep underground and an ingredient for making compasses and clocks, but demand for those things had never been enormous. So redstone tended to pile up, pretty but purposeless. His grandmother had said, and Stacks had never been any reason to think differently. The other miners mostly tolerated Osk because she was amiable and cheerful, except for Mr. Barnacle, who detested Osk and looked for any opportunity to berate her. Remember our discussion about people being funny in the sense of peculiar, and the kind of peculiar that unfortunately creates a burden for others? Well, I'm afraid that describes Mr. Barnacle pretty well. Stacks knew within seconds that his relationship with Barnacle wouldn't be a good one. He was a glowering hulk of a man who shook Stacks' hand with a grip that was hard enough to hurt, then said, "So you're the rich kid from the family business." Stacks opened his mouth to explain that his possessions consisted of his clothes, his pickaxe, a wooden sword, a bed, 2 arrows, but no bow, a length of spider silk, a compass, and a very small amount of credit in Tumbles Harbor General Store. He was pretty sure he didn't add up to being rich, but he sensed Barnacle wouldn't be interested, and indeed, the crew boss was already warning him about he was a man who didn't tolerate layabouts, that mining was a very serious business, and loudly saying other things that were meant to inform Stacks and all the other miners to earshot that he, Mr. Barnacle, was the man who must be respected. So Stacks limited himself to saying yes sir and no sir, and hoped that he and Barnacle would get along once the crew boss saw that Stacks really did know about mining. The funny thing was that Stacks had to admit he had been something of a layabout until very recently, doing nothing more vigorous than chopping down the occasional young oak. He tried to remember the last time he'd been down in one of the Stonecutter mines to actually work. Stacks had the good sense to not share any of that with Barnacle, resolving to work hard and give the crew boss nothing but complain about. To his relief, he found that the days spent hacking timber and shipwreck and rowing that toughed up his hands and strengthened his arms. A full day of labor in the mines, while not exactly relaxing, was something he could handle. Stacks was more surprised to discover that he was actually enjoyed being underground again. After so long, the routines of digging through stone in search for ore came back to him. Placing torches, feeling the head of the pickaxe bite into a rock, breaking down a block of stone in front of you, clearing it away, and seeing what had to be revealed. He also remembered the precautions his father had taught him to make sure that he was nothing behind you when you get swung your pickaxe, keeping the mine well lit, inspecting the ceilings and walls and floors of dripping water or excess heat, and listening for the growl of zombies or the music of running water. All those things came back to Stacks, so he did the pleasures of being underground. The cool air, the clean lines of the revealed stone, and the oddly sharp, faintly burnt smell left behind with the iron-struck rock. It wasn't so bad working beneath the tumbles. He didn't want to do it for the rest of his life or for any longer than he had to. But it wasn't the ordeal Stacks had feared he might be, or at least that wasn't true when Barnacle left Stacks and the other miners alone. Unfortunately, it was rarely the case. Barnacle always found some reason to criticize Stacks' crew, so with Stacks making himself attracted to the angriest and loudest complaints. Most of these complaints added up to Stacks being slow, both as a digger and as a supervisor. In Barnacle's eyes, Stacks took extra time to do anything, not because he valued his safety, but because he was lazy. Their worst real confrontation happened about 2 weeks after Stacks started. It was the last day of the month, meaning tomorrow Barnacle's crew would be working the deeper sections of the mines, where gems were common. While the crews working on the other crew boss, the mild-mannered Mr. Cope, would shift to ore mining. That meant the possibility of a larger bonus for Barnacle's miners, and for Barnacle himself. It was Stacks' turn to supervise, so he ordered the diggers today to Hody and Jerwo to mine his way the father had taught him. First they dug the main feeder tunnel. It was 2 blocks wide, meaning the diggers would work side by side, and 64 blocks long. Torches were placed on the left-hand side of the tunnel, only on the left, every 8 blocks. You're probably going to be the measurements sound too exact to be real, but I can tell you they're correct. So, now you're probably wondering how Stacks should measure distance so precisely down here under the ground. The answer was the modification he asked Brubs to make to his handle of his pickaxe. By making the handle exactly 1 block long, Stacks could use his pickaxe not just for chiseling out rock, but also as a precise measuring stick. His diggers had admired that little trick when Stacks first showed it to them, and it became so precise in their digging that Stacks rarely, if ever, had to correct them. Not even Jerwo found anything to complain about, except for being distracted by Hody's ornate descriptions of the undersea house of glass he was going to build for his sweetheart with the wealth they made of the sound seams of diamonds for the company. Stacks remembered the spiky, scaly guardians of the Sea of Sorrows, the nasty burn on his chest that was left a puckered pink scar he suspected he'd have for life, and shivered a little, but decided not to tell Hockey in the brush his death. So long as Hody did his work, there was no harm in letting him dream of castles beneath the waves. Digging the main feeder tunnel took up the entire morning, and turned up nothing but a few short veins of diorite and one of granite. A second instance, he and Hody and Joa took the loose stone they dug out and hauled it back to the junction of tunnels where there was a head house, depositing the stone in chests for disposal later. Then they returned. Stacks surveyed the clean, straight lines of the feeder tunnel with satisfaction. "Okay, gentlemen, now it's time to make some money," he said, directing them to dig a branch tunnel on either side of the main feeder tunnel. These 2 branch tunnels, he explained, would be precisely 16 blocks long, with one torch 8 blocks in and the other end of the tunnel. Jerwo was halfway down the right-hand tunnel when he intersected a seam of coal. A few minutes later, Hody cried out that he uncovered an iron ceiling of the tunnel. Stacks claimed the excited Hody and French Jerwo. The vein of iron ore snaked across the ceiling of several blocks, while the coal vein was long enough to reach where the next branch tunnel would be. Once the veins were exhausted and the coal of iron-rich ore was set aside, Stacks told the others to fill the gaps with cobblestone, restoring the pristine lines of the branch tunnels instead of leaving them honeycombed in gaps. Then he ordered the halt, and they sat in the feeder tunnel, eating bread sweetened and softened with some honey. Stacks had brought on a trip in a general store. They were just finishing a simple lunch when Barnacle arrived. "Lazy!" he cried out, striding down the tunnel, stopping as he lowered above them, hands on his hips. "Layabouts and do-nothings, wasting the company's money and costing me my bonus." Hody and Jerwo all but leapt to their feet, blinking nervously, but Stacks quietly ate his last bite of bread before he got up. "Oh, don't bother getting up, Sir Stacks," Barnacle sneered. "Why not spend the rest of the day eating and snoozing while other people do the real work?" Stacks was curious about Barnacle and figured out the insulting name Sir Stacks, but he somehow knew Chiggum and Rizzo from the caravan. He also thought it was until a few weeks ago that he had indeed spent most of his days eating and snoozing, and was perfectly happy returning to that life. But neither point seemed wise to bring up with Barnacle. "Regarding your bonus, Mr. Barnacle, I'm proud to say we had a profitable morning," Stacks said. "A fair-sized vein of coal located by Mr. Jerwo and a seam of iron found by Mr. Hody." "Regarding your bonus," Barnacle said loftily, his voice raising to imitation of Stacks. "Mr. This, Mr. That. You don't fool me, Sir Stacks. Your nice manners are how you get away with doing nothing. What more might you have found if you kept working instead of throwing yourselves in a carnival feast? Ever think of that?" Stacks started to defend himself, but Barnacle was already striding down the right-hand branch of the tunnel, his face turning bright red as he became angrier. "This is where you found the coal? Why did you seal these walls back up? What a waste of time, and for what? So the walls look pretty? I don't know how they did things with your daddy's mine, Sir Stacks, but around here they don't pay for pretty. We pay for ore and gems." Jura opened his mouth to protest, but Stacks shook his head. It's not so the walls are pretty, Sir Stacks told Barnacle. It's so you always know where they are, said another voice. It was Miss Tanny, her expression even more stern than it had been the day Stacks had met her. As Barnacle looked on with dismay, Miss Tanny walked up and down the length of the feeder tunnel, then inspected the 2 branch tunnels. I see you excavated the first branch tunnel, Stacks, she said. How far are the main tunnels would you make the next ones be? 8 blocks, she said. When you bore tunnel parallel to the main tunnel, 8 blocks in, there's a torches, and another end of the corridor, making a grid. A grid where everything properly lit with the minimum use of torches to accomplish it, Miss Tanny said. Torches on the left, correct? Stacks nodded. That way you can never get lost, even if you keep expanding the grid, Miss Townley said, turning to stare at Barnacle. If you lose track of where you are, you make sure the torches are on your right, to walk until you hit the wide tunnel. That's how your family mind operated at home, Stacks? Yes, Stacks said. My father worked out the system with my grandmother. They were excellent miners then, Miss Tawney said. Mr. Barnacle, this is a system I've tried to explain to you, not just once, but several times. Let's make this demonstration project. Stacks, I want you to mine the entire grid, using your stem. When you're finished, we'll tally up how much time you've acquired and how much ore you yielded. The results might prove instructive to other crews. Yes, ma'am, said Stacks. All right, then, carry on, said Miss Tawney, pivoting smoothly one heel and marching down the tunnel the way she came. Stacks decided immediately that it would be wise not to cause Barnacle any more embarrassment. Mr. Joe, Mr. Hody, the 3 of us need to get back to work, Stacks said, clapping his hand for emphasis, pointedly not looking at Barnacle's direction. Let's do that, please. Drew and Hody left their pickaxes and followed them farther down the feeder tunnel, but Stacks could feel Barnacle's gaze between his shoulder blades, burning almost as fiercely as the Guardians from the Sea of Sorrows, and sensed more trouble ahead. Drew sensed it too. This is bad, he told Stacks after muttering Barnacle had left the 3 alone. He'll be after us every day, demanding why we aren't delivering this kind of big bonus he deserves, accusing us of trying to cheat him, or even being lazy. We can't worry about that, Stacks said. All we can do is work hard and hope we can hit more rich veins, which will happen, you'll see. Haven't we already found coal and iron today? It won't be enough for Barnacle, Hody said. It wasn't even since the Braided Hill mine went bust. Don't say that name, Jero snapped, looking across. You know it's bad luck. Sorry, Hody said, and would have dropped the subject if Stacks had let him. What's the Braided Hill mine? Jody looked over at Jero, who threw up his hands in disgust. It's just another side of the eastern ridge, Jody said. The Barnacle promised the townies that there was a fortune of gems beneath it. And when they doubted him, he sunk a lot of his own money into it. Well, he was wrong. Ever since then, he's been frantic about the big store to make their money back, and his too. What about... And that's bad luck, Stacks said. He'd been known to superstitious miners on this day, and everyone knew mining was scabrous and could miss a vein of diamonds by a single block, and would go undetected for thousands of years. But while he'd heard of unlucky miners, the idea of an unlucky mine was new to him. I worked that mine, Stacks, and it's true, Jer will say. Day after day, nothing but stone. We must have taken out hundreds of chests full of rock, with barely 2 pieces of coal to rub together. Ever seen anything like it? And now we don't discuss it. Besides, Mr. Barnacle overhears the word Brandywine, he goes insane, and for the next few days are unbearable. Now that I believe, said Stacks. Tell me more about this mine. I want to know everything. Chapter 18. Strange Characters. Who is the champion? Stack makes a proposal. Oz conventions are found wanting. During this time working in the Tumbles Extraction Company, or Tech, Stacks had made it a habit to visit the general store every 3 or 4 days, with the relief of something other than the miner's dormitory to hear discussions that there weren't about ore and the gems, and he enjoyed Brub's ready supply of the news and gossip. Every time he visited, Stacks asked if Brubs had heard from the traveler who, in the lands beyond the Sea of Sorrows. Every time the answer was no. Until finally, standing in the general store and hearing the disappointing news yet again, Stacks realized that the answer was already going to be no. If he was going to get home, he wouldn't have waited for the more knowledgeable ship captain to get him there. He would have to find some other way. And the only answer Stacks could think of was the one that frightened him. He had to find Fueg Tempero. Fueg he knew how to get from the eastern end of the Sea of Sorrows to the Stonecutter estate. And, of course, he deserved to answer for what he did done to Stacks. But while Stacks fantasized about having his rev brooding over the compass Fueg had dropped, he couldn't imagine confronting the pitless raider. Over the last few weeks, Stacks had proved himself that he survived difficulties and danger, and he remembered the craft of mining and adjusted to the long, hard days of work below ground. But those successes had transformed him into a warrior. He still had no weapons except a wooden sword and a pair of scavenge arrows, and he knew it would take more than that to survive against Fueg. So it felt like a stroke of good fortune when Stacks overheard Brubs chatting with a leather trader about something they called the champion. Listening to the conversation, Stacks sensed that whoever it was this mysterious entity was, he or she deserved a capital letter. Not the champion, but the champion. As Brubs and the leather trader moved from negotiating a price of shipment of hides, Stacks realized what he heard the champion mentioned before a time or two. Overhearing the name spoken by miners, customers in the general store, locals at the Caravasani. Then the leather trader left. Stacks idled up to the counter. So you're just talking about someone called the Champion, Stacks said. Who is that? You know about the Champion? Brubs looked surprised. The man who brought Dark Ehrlich to justice, who cleared out the creeper nest below the Slither, who set the Merlin bandits fleeing into the wilderness? Stacks shook his head. Oh, he's quite the local hero, Brubs said. Lives a week or so out of town, in the mountains in the east. Though I doubt he's journeyed beyond the Sea of Sorrows, if that's what you're asking. No, nothing like that, Stacks said. So he's an experienced warrior, then. Greatest swordsman of the realm, if the stories are true, Brubs said. He used to come in here now and again, you know. Though I haven't seen him in years. They say he uses his castle as a base to explore strange realms, the nether, even the end. Anywhere evil threatens good people, he'll be there. Stacks felt his hope rise. He liked to think he was good people, and he certainly had this distressing encounter with evil. So people ask him to help? Yes, Brubs. They do, Brubs said. Though I hear the champion expects those who seek help to offer what they can't afford. Not for him, but so he can help others in need. He's a mercenary then, asked Stacks. Brubs started to object, but then stopped and laughed. It does sound like that, doesn't it? That's a good lesson, Stacks. Don't assume your local heroes are everything legends say they are. But no, I don't think that was quite fair. It was a band of poor farmers who asked the champion to run off the moving bandits, and I hear he agreed to return for a loaf of fresh bread each week. But when the royal twins of Far Newer were kidnapped, the champion retrieved the princess and prince. In return of the king and queen agreeing to suspend all taxes until the children's next birthday. That sounds like a fair outcome, doesn't it? I suppose it does, said Stacks. He thanked Brubs and left the general store, deep in thought. He was trying to imagine himself journeying to the champion's mountain's castle, and what his great warrior might say after Stacks told him he had suffered at the hands of Frigg Twempro. Stacks reluctantly decided this case sounded a lot closer to the missing princess than it did to the farmers plagued by bandits. Which meant the champion would want a lot more from him than a weekly loaf of bread. He's made a little money as the miner in his wages and bonuses, enough to build his credit back up to the general store, but nothing approaching the royal ransom. Then Stacks had an idea. You want to do what? Asked Miss Tawny. Reopen the Braidwine Hill mine, Stacks said. I don't believe it's unlucky or curse, or whatever your miners think it is. I'd like to see if I could distract it from you. Using my system, well, my family system, Miss Tawny regarded him for a long moment from the other side of the desk, her gaze even. I embarrassed Barnacle in front of you and the others because I was trying to get him to listen for a long time, she said. Now that I've made my point, it wouldn't do to make him look bad all over again, because that's what it's about, isn't it? No, Stacks said. Then what is it about? Justice, Stacks said grimly. A man destroyed my life. I intend to make him answer for that. I think you better tell me that story then, Miss Tawny said. So Stacks told her about Frigg Twempro raid on the house, and then being marooned, about his inability to find his way home, about the champion. Miss Tawny listened gravely, elbows on his desk in front of her, and fingers stippled. I know about the champion, though. I can't say I've met him myself, she said. So you want to enlist him to find his Frigg Twempro and defeat him for you, but to do that you need money. Yes. Well, you're making money, Miss Tawny said. The bonuses from the last round of excavation will be pretty good, and the next month you'll be on the gem crew, with the prospect of bigger bonuses. I know, but I'm in a bit of a hurry. I see. In that case, stop being indecisive or unnecessarily coy, or whatever this is, and tell me what you're proposing. Stacks looked down at his hands. His palms had become rough and callous from the days wielding a pickaxe. I'll mine Braden Hill Mine on my own time, with any miners who volunteer to work with me. You pay their wages, but not mine. I'll work for free. Standard bonuses for the miners, and I get a bonus due a crew boss. You get your owner's cut, of course. Even if I can make that mine pay off like you think you can, it won't be enough to hire your champion. I know that, Stacks said, and if Braymine does pay off, you'll hire more miners to expand operations there. With you as a crew boss, Miss Tawny said. Is that the idea? That's the idea. Stacks waited while Tawny considered this. He could almost see her brain making the calculations and then double-checking them. I have conditions, she said. First, you work 1 4-hour shift at night, maximum. I don't need tired miners making mistakes during the regular work hours. Second, it's a 3-person shift, you and 2 other miners. Third, you get the rest of the month to prove you're right. No longer. Stacks reviewed the calendar in his head. That gave him about a week. He winced and nodded. Fourth, Barnacle gets a minor cut of any bonuses out of your share of the crew boss. Then Stacks started to object, but Miss Tawny put up her hand. I know Barnacle's a handful, Stacks. I know it a lot better than you do, in fact. But he was with me and my husband at the beginning, and they were just 2 fools scratching in a hole in the hill. He's been loyal to us, and I'm loyal to him. He gets his cut. All right, Stacks said, not seeing what choice he had. Which miners do you want? To ask. Crease up and Tanner, Stacks said. You can't have either, Miss Tawny said. They're the first miners every crew boss asked for. I need them where they are. Hody, then? You can have Hody if you take Osk, Miss Tawny said. The little inventor? She's been barely swinging a pickaxe. I know, she's not much of a miner, though something tells me she'll look a bit harder for you than she does for Barnacle, Miss Tawny said. Thing is, she's smart. Which brings me to my final condition. I want you to visit her laboratory on the edge of the town. I want you to figure out if Osk is a genius, or a madwoman, or both. And I need a second opinion. So, Stack said, one shift at night, I get Osk and Hody and Barnacle gets his cut. I have till the end of the month, and first I need to go look at Osk's crazy machines. That's right, Miss Tawny said. Deal, Stack said, and stuck out his hand. Osk had the day off. All too aware that time was precious, Stax got Miss Tawny's permission to visit the laboratory that afternoon. He followed her directions to the little house in the outskirts of Tumbles Harbor. That one struck him as much as the same as the neighbors down in the little square of grass in front of it, with carefully arranged flowers. Stax, except instead of the torch or lantern from the light of the gate, the house was a curious faced cube. That's odd, said Stax, who had entirely broken the habit of talking to himself, though he mostly stopped doing it when other people were around. He stepped onto the porch and noticed that the house's front door was iron, not oak or birch he usually saw in Tumbles Harbor. Stax knocked on the door, started by the metallic bang 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 it was produced, and waited. Nothing happened, and Stax rapped on the door again, and this time heard a muffled voice from within yelling something. What? He called out. The button! Push the button! Stax noted a little nub in the wood next to the door. He pushed it, heard a musical chime from inside the house, and then the door snapped open, nearly smacking him in the head. He stumbled backward and noticed the strange cube at the gate was now glowing a warm yellow. Alice came to the door, wearing a leather apron marred by red blotches and streaks. Oh, hello, Stax, she said. Didn't you read the sign? There isn't a sign, Stax said. There isn't? Oh, you're right, there isn't. I forgot to put up. What? That's a nuisance. Osk returned a moment later with a sign that read, Ring doorbell. She leaned against the outside wall of the house. It's a redstone circuit, she explained. I can rig it open the door, or alert me down in my laboratory, so I can decide if I want to see visitors or not. I'm thinking of adding a pit in the porch, for salespeople. Just kidding. I'd get in trouble for that. Anyway, isn't it great? Plus, it makes the light come in so you don't have to see at night. The light's back of the gate, Stax pointed out. If you're already in the front door, that's a little late for the light to come on. Huh? You're right. Didn't think of that. Osk looked at her crestfallen, that Stax felt sorry for her. I'm sure that's something you can fix pretty easily, he pointed out. It's a little work, yeah, but you're right. Easily fixed. In fact, I should make it so the light comes on automatically at dusk. That's a great idea. Thanks, Stax. You're welcome, he said, bemused. Stax. So, who hadn't actually thought of anything? Anyway, I'm glad to see you. I suggested Miss Tanley send you over to look at my invention, and here you are. So, welcome. Come inside. What? You asked her to send me? Sure. That trick of yours with the pickaxe handle is clever innovation. Mining needs a lot more innovation. And, well, innovation's practically my middle name. Well, actually, it's Eunice. But never mind that. Come on in. I have a lot to show you. The inside of Osk's house was a mess, with gear lying around dispersed by a particularly ferocious windstorm. Osk led Stats to a trapdoor in the corner of the house, pushing a button on the wall next to it. Nothing happened. That's a nuisance, Osk said after several tries, reaching down to open the trapdoor herself and scuttling down the ladder. Stax followed her, emerging with a sprawling underground laboratory filled with a bewildering variety of objects, iron rails, squatting squares that looked like they were made of cobblestones and stone blocks, with wooden stalks sticking out of them. Tables were covered with books and papers with diagrams scribbled with them, sticky-looking balls that were sickly green and mounds of brilliant redstone dust. Did you build all this with the wages for mining? Stax asked, startled. What? Oh, no, I've only been working for Miss Tawny because I thought it would give me ideas for new inventions, and because she gives me a special rate on redstone. I see. So what do you do, Osk? Why, whatever anybody will pay me to do, Osk said with a grin. Isn't that what the way these days? I'm an enchanter, for one, best in Tumbles Harbor, or at least the second best. This Grimble, and he's pretty good. So maybe I'm the third best. Anyway, I'm an enchanter, but it bores me, if I were being honest. So I'm an architect and an engineer. But what I'm going to be is an artificer. An artificer? Stax. By the way, an answer, Osk scooped up a handful of crimson dust. You know what that is, right? Of course, Stax said. Redstone. It's used to make compasses and clocks. As he said that, Stax's hand strayed at the compass and pocket, while his mind was filled with fantasy and facing Foy Temporal with a diamond sword. Compasses and clocks, Oz said, shaking her head. Think big, Stax. Redstone is used for so much more than that. You could channel it to direct power and make machines. Well, I'll show you something that'll transform mining. Now, what did I do with that schematic? Oz sorted through papers, picking up and discarding diagrams of a variety of baffling devices before thrusting one under Stax's nose, a massive assemble of blocks and levers and objects labeled as Does this drop TNT? Yes, Osk said excitedly. See, when this mechanism's come along and make the way the water, it'll clear a massive quarry in the better part of the day. I thought it would be used to speed things up at Tubbles. If we had enough TNT to destroy a city, Stack said, and a fortune in emeralds to buy all this, and if Miss Tawny didn't mind us leveling the mountain, well, it's just one idea, said Osk a bit defensively. It's clever, said Stax, though actually he found Osk's proposed machine frightening. You know our minds, Osk. Do you have anything smaller and more affordable? Sure. Wait until you see this. Osk hurried over to... Hold on. Osk hurried over to the niche near the bookcase and ducked inside. There was a great deal of whirring and clicking. A flurry of motion. A moment later, Osk was decked out in leather armor, with an iron pickaxe in one hand and an iron bucket in the other. Ow, she said, putting the pickaxe down and shaking her hand in a grimace. That's my fault. I had my hand in the wrong place. I call it the Instaminer. You're geared up and ready to go in 30 seconds tops. Would you certainly prevent Tanner from forgetting his equipment, Stack said. But you know most of us don't wear armor underground. It's too much weight, and I can pick up my own pickaxe thanks to the enchantment known as opposable thumb. Well, if you don't want to do things the old-fashioned way, muttered Osk, stripping off her armor. But the moment after, she was brightened again. How about this? See, it's a sense in night's come. The switches on redstone lamps throughout the mine. Osk, mines are dark in the daytime, too. You need lights all the time. Oh yeah, you're right. Of course. I always forget that, somehow. Osk looked down at the floor. You're going to tell me, Miss Tawny, I'm some kind of loon, aren't you? She asked sadly. I'm going to tell Miss Tawny there's some great ideas here, and they just need a little more work, Zach said. My suggestion would be to think about the challenges we faced every shift. How about a machine that could detect gems from several blocks away? Or sense water or lava from that distance? Or a machine that would neutralize lava? Osk furrowed her brow, her hands plucking at her leather apron and raised her little plumes of redstone dust. The last one's an interesting idea, she said. You need water, of course. Maybe you can use a light sensor and pistons to block off the area. That might work. Let me think about that some more. That would get Miss Tawny's interest, Stack said. But remember, it needs to be small, not too expensive. Well, that's a nuisance, Osk said. But I can work with those limitations. Limitations can lead to genius, too. Though money works a little better. I know you don't believe me, Stacks, but redstone really is the future. You can do anything with it. I could change mining and farming, travel, everything. I do believe you, Osk, Stacks said. I have a proposition for you. One that might give you some new ideas. I'm listening, Osk said. So, Stacks told her about this plan, Braided Hill Mine, and Miss Tawny's conditions. I'll join your crew if I can have any redstone we find, Osk said with a grin. It'll all be yours, Osk, said Stacks, who hoped to be Brady Mine Hill Mine would indeed turn out to be filled with redstone and many more ores besides. And that's the end of that. My favorite way to end one of these is saying that, by the way. Anyways, that's the end of that. And, yeah. That's 21 pages. Honestly, reading these, it doesn't ever feel like X amount of pages. It always feels a little less or a little more. Usually a little less. Anyways, next time we're reading to 180, but actually we're reading either to 188 or 170. Oh, stop going backwards. Or 173. Honestly, either or works, but let's just say 173 for right now. And let's just say hypothetically, next we did read to 188, right? Oop doo 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 doo. We read to 188, and we had to go to page 200. How would that go? Where is the next end page? 205. So we would read from 173 to 200 and 205, which is in total 32 pages. Ooh, so 32, or next time I read 32 in one sitting, or next time we read 29? I think 58 to 187, so plus 2, so 9, which makes it 69, funny, 29. So the next time we read 29, or later, or the day after tomorrow, we read 31. I'm gonna just say tomorrow we read. Tomorrow we read a bunch. Why not? And then once we get to page 203, I think. Once we're done reading page 205, we have to go all the way to 220, which then is going to be 224, which is only 24 pages. So, hey. That's okay. It's just next time and the time after that, it's going to be kind of difficult. But that's okay. I like reading this book. Anyways, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. If you like the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.